Certainly. Here's section 1 of the script, tightly focused, straightforward, and aligned with your specifications. Lying awake, she watched his back as he drifted off, the rhythmic sound of his breathing almost mocking her wide-open eyes. In the dim room, she could make out his familiar shape, and yet, he felt like a stranger. She closed her eyes and tried to remember how they used to be, how just lying beside him used to make her feel safe and full of warmth. Now, that warmth was gone, replaced by a dull ache that gnawed at her, night after night. She turned over, trying to escape the emptiness that had crept into their lives. Days had turned into routines, a silent ritual of polite smiles, brief nods, and the occasional, "How was your day?" They'd become experts in small talk, avoiding anything that could open a door to the chasm between them. Even their conversations felt distant, surface-level exchanges that barely scratched the surface of their thoughts and feelings. He was always busy, always on the phone, caught up in a world that seemed to have no space for her anymore. She thought back to a time when just seeing him would light up her day, when she felt like she was his world. Now, it was as if she existed in a different orbit, rotating around him but never quite reaching him. She sighed, a quiet sound that went unnoticed in the heavy silence of their bedroom. At work, a colleague had become her escape, a small beacon in the monotony of her days. Their conversations were easy, filled with laughter, jokes, and a sense of lightness she hadn't felt in a long time. He had this way of listening, of really hearing her, his eyes meeting hers with a warmth she missed. There was nothing to it, of course, just an innocent friendship that had slowly become the brightest part of her routine. One afternoon, as she gathered her things to leave, he caught up to her. "Hey, I thought you might like this," he said, handing her a small, simple toy, a small stress relief gadget he'd noticed her fidgeting with in the office one day. She smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that felt strange on her face. She couldn't remember the last time she'd smiled like that, with no hesitation, no worry about being misinterpreted. It was just a moment of kindness, shared between two people. The toy became her companion, an odd reminder of something she couldn't quite name. She kept it in her bag, feeling its weight each day, a small piece of her work life slipping into her world outside. At night, she found herself reaching for it, rolling it in her fingers as her husband lay beside her, oblivious to the longing stirring within her. She felt guilty, even just thinking about those little moments with her colleague, wondering why they seemed to linger longer than they should. It wasn't about him, she told herself. It was about what he represented, the attention, the kindness, the gentle touch she'd forgotten could be part of her world. But late at night, in those quiet hours when sleep wouldn't come, she'd find herself thinking back to his smile, the way he'd handed her the toy with a touch of playfulness, a hint of something unsaid. She couldn't deny the thrill it gave her, the strange mix of guilt and excitement that flickered to life every time she thought of him. As her husband murmured in his sleep, she felt a pang of longing so sharp it almost hurt. She was still here, still by his side, and yet, something within her had already begun to drift. She found herself drawn to the moments with him, looking forward to them with a quiet anticipation that she tried to ignore. It started small, a brief exchange of laughter, a knowing look shared across a room, a text that lingered longer than it should in her thoughts. They'd talk over coffee, sometimes during their lunch breaks, these short pockets of time somehow becoming the highlights of her day. He would listen, really listen, not just nodding along but engaging, asking questions that made her feel seen. She hadn't realized how much she'd been craving that kind of connection until he offered it so freely. One afternoon, she met him for coffee after work. They talked about everything and nothing, his laughter warm and infectious, melting away the heaviness she carried with her. It was as if her soul had found a temporary escape from the monotony of her routine. For a moment, she let herself forget the boundaries, lost in the simple pleasure of someone truly listening. Just as they were getting ready to leave, he reached into his pocket and handed her the toy again, smiling in a way that was both familiar and somehow charged. You seemed to like it last time, so. I thought you could keep it, he said, his voice gentle, almost cautious. She looked at it, hesitating before slipping it into her bag. Thank you, she whispered, her words barely audible over the soft hum of the cafe. She could feel her heart beating faster, and a rush of something she couldn't quite name washed over her. Back at home, she took the toy out, feeling its weight in her hand, a small and unexpected reminder of him. She tried to brush it off, telling herself it was just a gesture, a simple act of kindness, but deep down, she knew it had become more than that. Every time she held it, a flicker of excitement stirred in her chest, a thrill of something new and forbidden, breaking through the quiet emptiness of her days. The toy had become a symbol, a tangible piece of the connection they shared, something small yet heavy with unspoken meaning. At work, their interactions grew closer, infused with a tension that both excited and terrified her. She knew she was playing with fire, yet she couldn't pull away. Each day, he'd find small ways to make her feel noticed, special, his attention like a balm for the loneliness she carried. She knew it was wrong to feel this way, but the lines had already started to blur, her heart betraying her in moments that lingered longer than they should. In quiet moments, she would catch herself thinking of him, her mind drifting to the way he'd look at her, his eyes warm and understanding, filled with a gentleness she hadn't felt in so long. She could sense that he felt it too, an unspoken current pulling them together, slowly erasing the barriers she'd tried to hold between them. The toy, resting in her bag or on her nightstand, became a reminder of that pull, something small yet potent, carrying a weight that she hadn't expected. She couldn't stop herself from craving more, from wondering where this connection could lead. The rational part of her screamed to stop, to put an end to it before it went too far, yet every time she saw him, her resolve melted, replaced by a reckless longing that grew with each passing day. She felt alive in his presence, the thrill of something secret sparking within her, something she couldn't resist. It was dangerous, she knew, this game they were playing, a delicate dance around the edges of something forbidden. But the desire was there, building like a quiet storm, pressing against the boundaries she'd built. She wasn't sure how much longer she could keep it contained, wasn't sure if she even wanted to try.